My name is Sue Franke. I am the Resident Services Manager here. And I just wanted to talk with you a little bit today about something that we don't touch on very often. We talk a lot about physical health. We've been talking a lot about emotional health as we've been in our apartments isolating and trying to keep the virus from spreading, keeping our 6-foot distance, washing our hands. Today I'd like to veer off and just talk a little bit about our memory health. Stephanie Reinheimer and I were supposed to teach a course called 2 Weeks to a Younger Brain, starting in April and going 5 weeks through May, but of course, since we are not able to come out and be together, we were having to cancel it. So what I'd like to do today is just talk a little bit about what we would have been talking about in the course. It's something that was developed by Dr. Gary Small. He is at UCLA as part of the Longevity Center there. He's a psychiatrist, and he has studied a lot about maintaining one's memory, but also strategies to be able to help remember things. So he talks about what he calls the big four, and I know that there have been many articles about different ways that research has come up with now to be able to help maintain your brain all the way from infancy, childhood, to adulthood. But Dr. Gary Small comes up with 4 main tenets, and these big 4 include healthy eating, so looking at some of the foods that really give us the best nutrition. He also talks about stress reduction, so finding ways as you feel yourself becoming anxious or you feel yourself clenching to learn to relax, deep breathing, yoga, those types of things. He also talks about physical activity. So looking at some of our classes that you can take on channels, on the television, or other classes or other videos that you have found online. So also walking is just an excellent way, and now that the weather has gotten so nice, to be able to do that, albeit as safely as possible, keeping our distance and wearing masks. But the fourth part of the big 4 is mental activity. So keeping our brains active and engaged. And I think right now that's something important to start thinking about. We find as we get older, we have pathways in our brain. If you can think of it, sort of the analogy to a creek that runs then into a river. A creek has a creek bed, and it flows through that, and all the different arms of the creek have their ways of flowing in, and everything works according to how it has been developed in the soil. And our brain works the same way. Our pathways in the brain they all just run through these crevices. And what Dr. Gary Small has asked is that we challenge these crevices and start to create new pathways. So thinking of things a little bit differently to be able to exercise our brain in the same way that they say if you do the same exercise over and over again, your body gets used to it, and to stretch it in different ways. So one of the questions that I want to ask you this morning is, a lot of times we forget where we've put our keys, or we might forget where we've put our glasses. You might forget somebody's name. And so I ask you, what is the main reason that you feel that you might forget something like that? And I would pose to you that the most prevalent answer for that is just inattention. We don't think about it. We don't think about where we put our glasses or the keys, or when you meet somebody new, you don't think about their name. You don't pay attention. So one of the things that we talk about is a concept called focus and frame. So to focus in on something and then to frame it into something that might be able to help you remember. One of the things that helps us remember the best is to use all of our senses. So we have the sense of touch, that feel, the sense of smell, sight, taste, listening. And so sometimes when we're starting this focus part of it, if we can use more of our senses than just, let's say, our sight to remember something, then it will help us, it helps develop a different pathway in our brain to help recall it later. So as you sit there, I ask you to think about a rose. So as you think of this rose, maybe even close your eyes, visualize it. So what color is your rose? Is it open or is it closed? Does the stem have thorns on it? What does the smell look like? What is the smell like? I'm sorry. And then if you were to touch it, what would it feel like? And as you open your eyes or you think on your rose, everybody's is going to be a little bit different. But since you've used all of these different senses, it might help you to remember the rose again. Or here's another one to think about. A horse running in a pasture. So close your eyes briefly. Visualize that horse. What color is it? What does it sound like running through the pasture? What might that smell be? Or if you were to touch the horse, what would that be like? So you can see how using all of those senses to actually focus on something can help you then to recall it later. So we take some of these ideas and then we put it into connecting things together. So I start with something that's just a little bit, I don't know, out there. So if you think of, let's say, a fireplace and a tree, if you wanted to remember those two objects, what could you do to help remember them as part of what we call unrelated word pairs? So you could just think of a tree standing outside of a fireplace. But I would challenge you, if you were to think of a tree, let's say growing up through the fireplace and out through the chimney, so that you saw that tree coming out through the chimney with all of its leaves and the greenness, maybe even smelling what it might be in there. So if I were to say fireplace again, you might be able to remember that we were going to connect it, we were going to frame it with a tree, because you've used more of your senses to be able to remember it. But you've also taken it and you've made something that is not just in reality, but something that is a little bit what we call fantastical. And I ask you to think about, so one of the word pairs that we do is thinking about a cow and a moon. Now, when I say cow and moon, the first thing you think about is a cow jumping over a moon because of the fairy tale. And to us, it's not unusual because we've seen so many pictures of cows jumping over a moon because of the fairy tale. But if you were to think of the two independently, how unusual is it for a cow to jump over the moon? So as you think of framing an object with something else, it's thinking about them in ways that you might not otherwise think about them. So to give you something that might be helpful on down the line, let's say you're in a parking lot and you see a sign that says you are on 3B. You're on level 3B. And maybe it's yellow or maybe it's green. So how do you remember that? Short of taking a picture with your smartphone now, which also is very helpful. But thinking of it in sort of a fantastical way to help you remember. So think of 3 bees. Maybe these are huge bumblebees, yellow if our sign is yellow, and they are flying above your car in just this unusual way. So if, as you get out of the car, you think about that, then when you go to remember where your car is, you're going to be able to visualize it because you've also heard the bees You may have also felt what a bee feels like when it stings you, so you have more senses to go on. I tried this with my grandkids a couple of weeks ago when we were in a parking lot, and you know, when we came to find that parking space, they could remember it, having developed this sort of fantastical idea of what we were trying to remember. So we will talk more about this in ongoing sessions, as the resident services coordinators will be back with you on a monthly basis. But I ask you to pay attention to an object and think of it possibly in a fantastical or just in a whimsical way to help you remember how you want to connect it with something else. So that idea of focusing and framing to make it a full picture to help you remember. And then as you go about your day, just paying attention to certain things. You know, our memory, we can enhance our memory by doing something as simple as going through the alphabet and trying to name a food with each letter of the alphabet. If you're sitting, just start thinking of all of the different states, see how many you can come up with. So there are all different ways that we can challenge our memory without even going to something like Sudoku or crossword puzzles, but just to be there and thinking of something that might be outside the box. And I find that sometimes as I think about doing something like that, it almost as if it is too much work for our brains. And that's the way we know that to do it also is that brain activity that will help keep it and keep the neurons firing in the brain to be able to help keep it as active and engaged as we can. And I know that's something that's important now as we go through days in our apartments where we're doing very similar things each and every day. But I ask you to really challenge yourself. Thank you. We'll be back in another month. Take care.